Hi, this is Curt and welcome to another edition of Fire Law Roundup.
Yeah, so look, let me start with our normal list of disclaimers. This is a lawsuit. This is an accusation. This is not a court finding. This is not a jury determining what the facts are. What we are going to talk about are allegations, nothing more than allegations. We're not passing on whether it's true or not. My shock to this is if it is true, oh my God. And I start with, if anyone's saying, why aren't the police involved? It does raise my questions because I didn't see in here, but if this is true, the individual should have been arrested on multiple occasions. In any event, I'm going to go through this. This is
well, one caveat, Brad, right up front, there's a couple of things that kind of jumped out to me, and I agree 100% what you said, and I put them early in the thing, but there was allegations that she was wrongfully denied workers' comp, and also that she was reassigned against her will, so there's some factual questions there in terms of motivation. I want to make sure that that's in there. At least I'm not defending the chief. I'm not saying, but to be as objective as we can in a case that just
both sides.
Like how were there not criminal charges brought?
Right. It raises the question, is it true? And we're just raising the question. If you're the individual who's in the female and you're watching this, or the chief and you're watching this, we're neither defending nor prosecuting you. We're raising questions that anybody would ask.
Trying to be clinical and objective about this.
Right. So you raised the question of why is it coming up now after certain benefits were denied or rejected. I also raised the question, it was one of my last notes, but I'll bring it up first before we get into these amazing allegations, that why wasn't it ever reported? Because it's hard to imagine. I'm not saying it didn't happen. It's hard to imagine that with the gravity, the seriousness of these allegations, that it wasn't reported, that you didn't at least say something to somebody, right? So, and yes, I get it. There's the other side. Well, this was my chief, so I didn't want to say anything. It's just, it's unbelievable if it's true. It's unbelievable if it's not true, right? Incredible thing. So here's what happened. We are in Ohio, and there's now a federal lawsuit, and these are verified. So somebody has signed a verified under oath. I swear that this is true. If these are not true, this person's going to lose a lot of money in defamation suit. But and the general accusation, it's a sexual assault, sexual harassment. It should be also sexual retaliation, discrimination. All of those are in here, I'm sure. And we have that a Port Clinton fire chief, who I believe is career, in this career, at least partially career, but career department. I don't know if it's a combination, but that there was a long-standing pattern of harassment, also a sexual assault going back years. The chief right now, as is appropriate, it's not a sign of guilt. It's a sign of doing a proper investigation on the employer's end. The chief is on leave. So here are the complaints. I may change some words, but it's a long complaint, very detailed. And it talks about that the female firefighter alleges that she was, I'm going to get specific, inappropriately unwelcomed, against her will, physically touched, kissed, hugged, groped, grinded against, had been sent text message, unwelcome visits to her home when her fiance was there, which is the other part about this.
Well, the fiance was not there. The fiance was a firefighter and he was in the station. So the chief would go over to her house when he knew
when he's not there.
He wasn't there, yeah. Which
makes some sense, but going back to being clinical, looking at both sides, if you have a fiance, don't you tell the fiance? And then I generally thinking the fiance is not going to stand for this if you told that person. And look, to everybody who's accusing someone of harassment, discrimination, etc., you need to report it when it happens. One, because your policy says it, but two, if not, these are the questions that get raised. Why didn't you say something before? And it's going to go into the determination of whether you're being truthful or not. Why didn't you say something when it just happened? And I always see, okay, first time we didn't say anything, was one off. I didn't want to embarrass myself. I didn't want to embarrass the chief. But you get 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 allegations. So listen to some of these allegations. And rightly so, you say that the individual accuses the chief of wrongfully denying her workers' comp for a line of duty injury, reassigning her for as his personal secretary upon her return to duty, and removing or destroying training records to make it harder for her to recertify. Now, the last one is a little more retaliatory, but it raises the question, right? Is this report because that happened, or is this, right, did that happen because of this report? Who knows? So here are some of the complaints. Allegedly, I'm going to say allegedly, that's not what this says, but let's see. When the female firefighter was visibly pregnant in July of 21, she was pouring herself a cup of coffee when the chief came behind her and forcibly grabbed her rear end. And allegedly in July 22, and note the date, right? I mean, we're a year plus back. The chief allegedly called the female firefighter into his office to show a new ambulance, which he claimed to be buying for her. I'm assuming she was in charge or somehow involved in EMS and some leadership capacity is what it seems. He says, you got to come around to see this from my side of things, from my computer side. So she comes around the desk to see it. So they're looking at it. The chief then allegedly pushes his chair back from the desk, ran his hands up the calf of her legs towards her very private areas. The female firefighter claimed that at that time she smelled alcohol on the chief's breath. And that, I got to tell you, at that point, again, the clinical analysis asks the question, wait a minute, if somebody smells of alcohol, why isn't anybody else raising the issue? It's hard to imagine in a firehouse that doesn't get raised. And to the female, I'm not attacking you. I'm raising the questions you're going to be asked, period, right? You're going to be asked, why are you the only one who ever smelled alcohol in this person's breath? Now, you may not be, right? Others may now come forward and say, oh, no, we've all known about it.
And we call that corroboration.
Yes.
Right? So, right.
So if you're the only one, it looks bad, but maybe people will come forward. Who knows? Anyway, she apparently jumps away and says, what the F? He tried to approach her. She apparently shoves him back in the chair. And apparently he had a noticeable wet spot on his pants. Now, look, we're going to keep going, but at the point you're physically laying your hands on each other, one is going to ask you, why didn't you report that to the police? He's touching you, he's grabbing you, you're pushing him away. That's an assault, allegedly, right? But those make up an assault. Why wasn't that reported a year ago? Why did you do nothing? You're going to be asked that. So apparently then the next day there's a text and he says, I feel like a pedophile. Now, there's presumably an actual text that this person saved. If you're the attorney, you're going to say, do you have that text message, or you're going to get it somehow, right, from Verizon or whatever. So I'm assuming that they can substantiate that, because now this is not he said, she said. This is, I have a text message. Why did he say that?
And several of the texts are actually in the complaint. So if you read the complaint, you'll see several of them actually in here. This particular one, I don't believe was, but several of the others are.
Which raises some question, but nonetheless, just because there is that comment doesn't mean what happened the day before is true. It just corroborates. And then we go back more in August of 21, just to show you how long it's been going on. Apparently the chief texted the female that about the bay lockers behind the ambulances, saying he was cleaning out a spot for the fire prevention equipment she was organizing. And then on the next shift, he shows her what he did. Now, I don't know why the chief is cleaning things, but I did too, so be it. In any event, she then says she feared for her safety because of the escalating behavior toward her. This is what I didn't understand just from your timing, because the other one was 22. This is now 21. So I didn't know if there was a typo there, but this is August 21, a year before that. So I I don't know what's escalating because this had escalated later from what we see in the complaint. Any event, raising the questions. Apparently, the chief pushed her face into the lockers with his hands on the door, gripped her shoulders, pushed his groin into her, began grumping and rubbing her in the back and the buttocks, right? And that you're going to be asked, why weren't any of these reported? Why didn't you scream? Right? And I please do not start attacking me if you're saying, oh, rape victims do this, don't do that. I'm asking questions. You're going to be asked. And the question you're going to be asked is, now you have 2 incidents of forceful, physical, alleged touching. Why didn't you report any of those to the police or to the HR manager? Clearly, there's someone over there. It's going to be questioned. And then there's some other things. He kisses her on the head, shoulders. That's not all of it, but that's most of it. If this is true, wow. If this is not true, wow. And I don't know. Let me ask this, Curt. So let's play this out. If you're the city, my 2 cents is I wouldn't settle this unless the chief admits to it. If the chief admits to it, okay, we've got a settlement. Now, but I got to tell you, obviously, look, when the head of the organization assaults you, you're liable whether you knew about it or not.
Right.
Right. So it doesn't matter that you reported it from the purpose of liability, because he's the head of the department, the city's liable, or whoever's liable, department's liable regardless. It goes to credibility that you didn't report it. But assume for the moment you don't think the chief doesn't admit to it, you do your investigation, you can't corroborate any of it. Nobody was around at the time of the lockers. Nobody's ever smelled alcohol in his breath. Nobody has ever seen them inappropriate. The text messages aren't really, conclusive to anything. What would you do? Would you settle? Would you fight?
I think I'd do an independent investigation. And because it's the chief, it's not something that you can have somebody in the organization do. So we got to do an independent investigation. If the investigation concluded that the chief did it, I want this out of there as quickly as possible. We're going to settle it. We got to work with the insurance company, and we got to move on. Whatever she needs in terms of therapy to get her back to a fully functioning employee and a valued member of the department, that's what we got to do. And whatever compensation, we did it, and so on. If the investigation goes in the other direction, she was upset about maybe some of the ways that she was treated. Now we get a different situation, and I think that we're going to have to grind it out. We're going to have to.
No pun intended.
Yeah, no, not sexually grind, but legally, we're gonna basically do the thing that defense attorneys, our friend Chip, any defense attorney is going to do, is just going to, depositions, request for production, deposition, request for production. Let's take a look at your medical records. Let's take a look at what your psychologist is saying. Might there be some other reason for you doing this, and so on, and then it gets dragged out for both sides. So
forever.
I think,
in fact, if anyone's watching,
I think that investigation is really the most important thing right now.
Agreed. And a neutral one, right? Somebody who's getting paid regardless. I've seen contingent fees based on, well, if your investigation concludes it, right? None of that. Independent. Chip Comstock would be a great person to do this investigation, frankly, in Ohio. I agree. Independent investigation, no one tied. And it's the report. Unfortunately, the report's going to be discoverable. The facts, the testimony, and it's a little bit to talk about, right? But even if you have an attorney do the report, it's not attorney-client privilege. The facts are usually not protected by attorney-client privilege. Your opinions and conclusions of those facts are protected. Might not be in this case, but your determination, what you found, may or may not be protected. But you got to do it. You got to do the investigation. And look, if you're wrong, you're wrong. I'm not saying it's a defense that she didn't report it, but it goes to mitigate damages in some sense, right? Had you reported earlier, we would have done something earlier. But this isn't going to be the last we see about it. This is going to go on forever unless they conclude that they're wrong and then pay up.
You know, when I teach the discipline class, we talk about the importance of corroboration. And you have these allegations, and to the extent that she can corroborate this, either through, she's got some of it corroborated through the text messages, but other witnesses, absolutely critical. Someone who behaves like this chief is accused of behaving doesn't just behave that way to one person.
I would agree.
And so that also would be an important corroboration if there are others who have experienced similar types of behavior. On the other hand, the absence of that corroboration raises a question as well. So it's all about, it goes back to what I said before, the importance of a good, objective, fair investigation. Unfortunately, sometimes municipalities and attorneys find that they don't want to do a fair and objective investigation. They want like you said, they want it to come out in a certain way, and then we're left with problems. And I think the best thing that we could do is figure it out. And if the city was at fault, if the chief was indeed responsible for what he did, then we've got to lump it. We're going to have to pay.
Right. And and look, it's hard to ask the hard questions, but there are hard questions that are going to be asked of her and of the chief. Yeah. Right. One of the hard questions is going to be if you knew it was a problem, if you knew he assaulted you, why would you go to a private area with him? I mean, I could think of a ton of hard questions. Why didn't you report it? Things like that. And then on the other hand, the victim, there's a lot of victim mentality, especially in the employer side but he's my boss and I don't want to lose my job, But on the other hand, you didn't tell your fiance. Well, no, I didn't tell my fiance because I was embarrassed. I mean, there are both sides of these, and there's got to be something that proves it. The text messages help. They're kind of circumstantial evidence of what did you mean when you said, I feel like a pedophile. It's a little out of character because I don't know how old she is. Did we see how old?
I think she's 31 and he's in his 50s, I think.
Yeah. So that comment doesn't make sense necessarily. So it's circumstantial evidence, but it's not really evidence of anything. He didn't say, I'm sorry for grabbing you, but this is going to go on for a while. But this case is good for our viewers because it talks about how do you react and how, right? And you should have a policy that says, we're telling you, you have to report it, even if it's the chief. And when I teach sexual harassment, I say, look, it's a chief who harassed you, you go to an assistant or you go to somebody above the chief. You must report it. We're telling you, you don't have a choice to report it. And the reason I do that you have no choice to report it is because I don't want you, the victim, right, worrying about your job, worrying about you're going to be retaliated against. I required you as the employee to report this, whether you wanted to or not, you had to. And that's, I think, the important part of this. But training matters, reporting matters, an environment where people feel comfortable to make reports is important. And I'll tell you, to all the future victims out there, if you wait to report until someone retaliates against you, you're going to be asked a question that Curt and I are asking you. Why did you wait? It looks suspicious. You're not doing yourself any favors. At least make a memo of it. At least report it. At least document it and stamp it or something where you can prove this is what happened back on this date. Mm-hmm. You're not doing yourself any favors by not reporting these things if they happened.
Yeah, and the fire department should have a policy, just like you said, that you need to report. I feel bad saying you have to, because there's a lot of reasons why people wouldn't want to, but there should be a pathway to report it and an anti-retaliation provision in that policy that prohibits any retaliation against someone who reports this.
Right. And look, from the employer is a standard line, but if you're on the receiving end of it, it's not so harmless. The employer will say to you, listen, Chief X, we don't know whether you did this or not. So we're not going to take action against you, but we are reminding you that this is not appropriate conduct, whether you did it or not. Don't do it. At nothing else, you've quelled the situation, right? As the employer to say, hey, we told them, you put the person on notice. If you're doing this, don't, right? Because you can't fire everybody based on an accusation. You don't know. So, but at least it relieves you of some liability and hopefully stops the situation,
And prohibit you, exactly what you said, and prohibit the chief from retaliating. You cannot retaliate against this person. And that's actually in the EEOC has 5 credibility factors. And at the end of their document that talks about the importance of doing a good credibility determination as part of a sexual harassment investigation, they say that where the burden of proof is not met, to discipline the employee. So where, you know, the witnesses are all credible and you can't tell who's telling the truth, you can't discipline, but you've got to tell them, don't, if like, just like you said, if this did happen, it would be a violation, but you've also got to tell them you cannot retaliate against this person. Very important.
Right. And I'll tell you, I have, it's funny, I have 4 sexual harassment suits now, 2 where I represent the harassed and 2 where I represent the department. The 2 I represent the harassed just paid. They paid my clients because they weren't sure, right? They weren't sure. They didn't know. I trust my client, but you know, you don't know, right? Necessarily what happened. So people pay to make it go away, but it always follows with this will not happen again. And I will tell everybody, your minimal response to every single complaint: investigate, train, investigate, train, investigate, and train. If you will investigate and train, you are so much up here, right, as to your protection. If you fail to investigate and then train your employees that this conduct is not acceptable, the allegation's been made, right? If you do not both investigate and train, you are stabbing yourself in the leg. You're going one-armed into a fight, you know, that type of thing. But investigating, training is always your response, whether or not you believe it or not. And that helps you and that helps the department most times, but always investigate and train.